Good morning, everyone. My name is Suzanne. I am the moderator for today's webinar on how to use the Accessible Earth Do-It-Yourself Toolkit. And it is a CFILC collaboration between our programs of Ability Tools and the DO Network. I'd like to turn it over to Kyla and Allie and Kevin.
Thank you, Suzanne. Good morning, everyone. We are so excited to get started. So welcome to our Accessible Earth Do-It-Yourself Campaign Toolkit. We are hoping that this toolkit will help the CFILC, or the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, launch our Accessible Earth Month. Next slide, please. I'll go into more detail about that later. So today we have myself. I'll have everyone just introduce ourselves. This is Kyla Aquino Irving. I'm the Communications and Marketing Manager for the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers. I think some of you may know me from other webinars, and I'm excited to be here. Allie?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Allie Cannington. I see a lot of comrades joining us today, and thank you so much for being here. I'm the statewide community organizer for the Disability Organizing Network, a program of CFILC. So I'm excited for the space that we'll be able to create together today. Kevin?
Good morning, everybody. My name's Kevin Hansen, and I am the Device, Lending, and Demonstration Center and Reuse Manager. Yes, a long name and title. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Okay, next slide, please. So as I was saying, CFILC, or the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, is introducing an Accessible Earth Month. So we are hoping to bridge this community of disability with the concerns of making sure that our the things that we do are sustainable, so that we don't deplete the resources today, so that we meet the needs of today without depleting the resources of tomorrow. And I'll let Kevin and Allie kind of talk more about our toolkit.
So this toolkit is designed to help the disability community create partnerships with public and private and other disability organizations, and to give access for people with disabilities within your community. The toolkit will also help us build awareness of reusing AT and giving a second life to the equipment rather than disposing of it in landfills. It's also going to help us give each agency the guidelines for creating their own Earth Day event in the future. And that's one of the main things, is building awareness and giving steps that help create a successful campaign for Earth Day and any other type of events that you may be planning.
And this is Allie. I just also want to share that I really think disability is everywhere. It is connected to all of our communities, and through some of the amazing work that CFILC has been able to do with key partners, some of which are on the line, we're really exploring, what does it look like to build relationships with other communities that are fighting and pushing for more justice, including environmental justice and conservation. And so this is a really unique, powerful point of connection amongst so many elements of the disability community, as well as the environmental conservation and justice communities.
Next slide. So what is the California Assistive Technology Reuse Coalition? The mission of the coalition is to enhance and extend accessible technologies that assist in the daily life of all Californians with disabilities by enabling and promoting reuse. The vision that we have for the Reuse Coalition is to create an effective AT reuse network that enhances the opportunities of Californians with disabilities to obtain assistive technology and equipment that empowers them to live more independently. To become a member, the qualifying characteristic is if you have an interest in doing reuse in your community, you can go to our website and apply or give us your email and let us know that you're interested, and we can add you to our coalition and you'll be invited to all of our meetings that we have. One of the things that the Reuse Coalition does is that we receive AT of any types, and the AT that we receive, typically people, when they think of assistive technology, think of wheelchairs, scooters, and shower chairs, things of that nature, that size. But in reality, it can be magnifiers, reachers, anything that assists with your daily needs and accessibility, being able to do daily functions. And so we can receive these devices, and then once we receive them, we make sure that they're in good working condition and that they're clean and sanitized. And then once we do that, we list them on a public database where people can view the items that we have, and we either give them to the consumers at no cost, or it's a low cost so that we kind of recover the costs of the repairs, so that we can keep the public or the program going for the future. So next slide. So the role of AT reuse. Reuse makes things affordable, assistive technology affordable, and gives access to others that would not have the equipment that they need otherwise. With recent changes to healthcare, receiving assistive technology has become more difficult, and reuse centers will give more people the opportunity to obtain the needed AT at little to no cost. The reuse that we're talking about also reduces the amount of resources to build new AT and new equipment, and makes a lower carbon footprint. By donating gently used equipment, one of our programs called Keep the Wheels Rolling has kept over 22,000 pounds of materials, AT materials, from entering the landfills by giving them a second home and to consumers that are in need. Next slide.
We are looking at what we could do for Earth Day if we pair our reuse ability with Earth Day. We're just thinking about, these are three potential events that we could do, or potential activities. So there's three images. One is a Black man holding a phone with huge buttons. So the suggestion is that maybe we could have assistive technology demonstrated at maybe an existing Earth Day event, like maybe have a booth where there's assistive technology devices laid out. And we want to be in spaces where the general public is, since, you know, the numbers are saying 1 out of 5 people in the United States have different disabilities. So being in the public space is a good idea. You know, we don't have to be relegated to just events that are labeled for people with disabilities. Another cool idea I've seen is a fix-a-thon. I've seen this for bicycles at Earth Day events, where people bring in bikes that are in need of repair, and they're able to repair them on the spot or donate them so they could be repaired and reused for other people. Why not do this for assistive technology? And then another option is to have AT, make available a space for AT to be dropped off, or even provide a listing. If you are tabling a booth at an Earth Day event, have a list of places where potential AT can be dropped off in other places. So say you attend an Earth Day event, but you forgot to bring the old wheelchair or the old device that you wanted to donate. Maybe you can make an arrangement with the booth at another time. So these are just some ideas, but I'm sure you guys all have other great ideas out there. I know our systems change advocates always have cool ideas on how to get the word out. So those are, in my mind, if you find a systems change advocate in an independent living center, they have always the great ideas in my mind. So you can get with them in your local areas. Next slide, please.
Great, thanks, Kyla. This is Allie again. So, you know, just to piggyback off of what Kyla was sharing, I think, you know, this toolkit that it has been released, is live now, provides a lot of different ideas and frameworks for you all to determine what makes most sense to your local areas. Y'all are always learning and are the experts on your local areas, and so really thinking about what makes sense for your center, your organization, and your community in, you know, where you are and the networks that you're connected to. So once you decide on, you know, a potential event for celebrating Earth Day, Accessible Earth Day, or Accessible Earth Month, there's, you know, I want to talk just briefly, you know, this is just touching the surface on what it means to mobilize your networks to know about this event, get involved, participate, and not just in the day of, or, you know, however long your event goes for, but also for long-lasting relationships that can, you know, go even from year to year, as, you know, Earth Day is an annual event, an annual day. So just in brief, you will, a recommendation for steps to mobilize your networks is develop an outreach list, create your communication plan, meet with key leaders, and then tap into those networks and utilize your networks to then get people to come to your event, learn about your organization, and also just learn what the incredible connection is between access, disability, and environmental conservation. And I just also want to elevate the fact that, you know, in the disability space, particularly independent living, we use assistive technology as a concept all the time. But to be real, I've been in the disability rights movement for more than 10 years, and it's now just clicked for me what truly assistive technology is and how much I utilize it as a chair user. And I never made that connection before. And so I like to say that, because even folks within our community are still learning about, you know, the power and proximity we have to AT, and then the importance of sharing that framework and definition and concept with your partners that may not be as proximate to disability spaces, particularly environmental. Next slide. Great. So looking at the, you know, first step is to develop your outreach lists. And, you know, this is a chance, when we first came together to look at Accessible Earth Month, and, you know, this toolkit, this is a really unique opportunity if you are at a independent living center for the AT, the assistive technology advocate, and the systems change or community organizer to work together, to partner. And so if you are at an independent living center, I would invite you to have an initial meeting with your AT advocate, systems change advocate, and any other relevant staff that you think would play a role in not just the event itself, but understanding who are, you know, the target populations that you believe would most benefit from your Accessible Earth Day event. And once that, you know, meeting is had, talking about who are the key stakeholders that already are involved in assistive technology, as well as, you know, what are some, you know, doing an environmental scan of what are the environmental organizations in your area, and do you have existing relationships with them? If not, is this an opportunity to reach out and say that you would like to learn more about their work and engage in their Earth Day activities, so that you have an opportunity to share with them what disability and access and assistive technology is all about and reuse, but also and they have a chance to, you know, share with you how you can support their work. And, you know, also, of course, this is about, when it comes down to it, our Earth. And when we're talking about reuse, we're able to to not just save materials from getting into our dumps and further degrading our environment, but this is also an opportunity for consumers and people with disabilities to be able to access assistive technology that they may not have had access to, or they're waiting on a long list in order to get it. And so thinking about existing consumers that you want to partner with in this event. And then with these conversations that are had, developing an outreach list, so key contact information, and then delegating the roles of who will reach out to who. And I just want to remind everyone that this meeting will bring together what already exists within, your world of work, but it's channeling it into reuse, AT, and, under the umbrella of course, Accessible Earth Month and Earth Day. Next slide. All right, so I just got to express some true amazing gratitude to Kyla, and she's once you have your outreach list, you want to develop a communication outreach plan, a timeline of when you want to reach out to folks, what kind of communication is best for those particular consumers or existing partnering organizations or new future potential partners. And so Kyla has put together email templates and social media posts that folks can adapt and use for their local communities. And she also Kyla's laid out a sample timeline of building up to your event, your day of. And so really dive deep into the toolkit and see how it can really help and support the work that you want to see happen at your center or at your organization. Next slide. So there's just, in terms of an image description, there is a person, a white woman with her face. She's very excited, and there's a bunch of little faces all around her with different lines. And this is about, again, mobilizing your networks, and that we're all connected to each other, sometimes in obvious ways, and often sometimes in ways that we don't expect. And I think that Accessible Earth Month exemplifies the unexpected partnerships. I think that folks wouldn't assume that necessarily environmental and disability organizations would come together, but it's so necessary for reuse and for emergency preparedness and response, so many issues facing our community and our planet. And so when it comes to, again, looking at the event that you want to hold and mobilizing your networks, once you have developed your communication plan and with the outreach list that you've put together, you want to, it's really, really all about relationships. And I just want to give a shout out to Maria from Cecil, who's been an amazing partner and who always reminds all of us at the Disability Organizing Network the power of relationship building. And so, particularly thinking about the organizations that you want to build partnership with, who are those key leaders that maybe you've met before at an event, or that you may have an existing connection with, or maybe you don't, but you identify, oh, they have a director of community outreach. Maybe that's the person you reach out to first. And schedule what we like to call in community organizing a one-on-one. And that is, grabbing a cup of coffee, talking about, what brings you to this work, and, not going right into, oh, hey, do you want to be here on this day at this time? That comes a little bit later, maybe towards the end of your conversation or a follow-up, but just getting to know the person. And, this is, as Kyla, framed at the beginning, we're building bridges here. And these bridges, haven't really been built before in you know, in some areas, yes, but this is often new for, you know, disability organizations as well as environmental organizations. And so schedule those one-on-ones, and then, you know, I just want to, again, utilize your networks that you're already connected to, you know, and even within your center, within your organization, how are you communicating to your coworkers so that when they are doing, you know, direct service work with a consumer, or they're running a meeting, that they are also amplifying, you know, your event that's coming up, and I think, yeah, I think that's it for now. You know, again, this is just reaching the surface of some key steps in making your event successful. Next slide. All right, so I just want to highlight really, really tremendous work that I know that the Disability Organizing Network would not have been able to do without key partners, including the Monterey Bay Aquarium and CECIL, which is the Central Coast Center for Independent Living, and Maria's on the call. And so, you know, we created the Discovering Alternative Straw Use for People with Disabilities report. And I want to just share a little bit of background about how this came about. Last year, there was a piece of legislation that was passed, and it went into effect January 1st of this year. And that is California banned single-use plastic straws in full-service restaurants unless a customer requests one. And there was, when all of this legislative work was happening in 2018, in the state of California, people with disabilities really spoke up. A lot of it happened on social media with the hashtags, you know, with key hashtags that, you know, includes the straw ban and suck it ableism, and it really was talking about what this potential straw ban would harm, how it would harm people with disabilities. And the reality is that many members of our community use straws as a piece of assistive technology. That straws, access to straws, particularly single-use plastic straws, give folks access to community living, to being able to eat and drink in ways that are accessible to them, and not having, you know, this was one of the examples of when we don't have people with disabilities at the table, you know, decisions are made without us, and unintentionally or can intentionally harm us. And so the Disability Organizing Network partnered with the Monterey Bay Aquarium and CECIL to do the most comprehensive study that in the country right now. And, you know, it's a small one, but it's still the most comprehensive about, you know, what if single-use plastic straws are going to be, you know, slowly pushed out of the market or less accessible. Number one, how do we elevate the need for single-use straws to still be available to those who need it, as well as what are people with disabilities and their experiences with alternative straws, mainly, you know, non-plastic straw options. And so I want to thank everyone on the webinar who made this study possible. And because we had people with disabilities across the state of California actually testing out different kinds of alternative straws. And we put together a report and found, you know, the best alternative straw for people with disabilities, but also realizing that the needs of people with disabilities are so diverse and so nuanced, and the importance of having straw access for people with disabilities is a necessity, period. And how can we build relationships with organizations that are, you know, involved in issues related to straws, and be able to to create a bridge where we can, we shouldn't have to choose between environmental conservation and accessibility. So I just want to say that the report and a fact sheet in both Spanish and English are on the Disability Organizing .net website, and they are hyperlinked in your toolkit. And it really, the toolkit or the report and the one-pager really provide ideas for the power of partnerships and cultivating a win-win. So there's local environmental organizations, local policymakers, and local restaurant owners and workers, and ideas for how you can collaborate with those individuals and how we can influence the access to straws that people with disabilities need. Thanks so much. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Allie. I know that she worked so hard on making sure that we built these bridges, and I want to make sure that we continue these conversations going forward. So I want to elaborate more on the promotion side of the event. This is where I specialize in the marketing and communications. So as Allie said, connect with your partners and have those one-on-one conversations, but also find out what their social media handles are. It's super important to make sure the partners you have online are also partners that you know in the real world, and vice versa. You want to make sure that they have your social media handles as well. This helps for when you share your information on your event or any sort of beliefs about Earth Day that you want to share, or Earth Month concepts. You want to make sure that you have someone in your partner organizations you can call and say, hey, we just shared something on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Could you, reshare what we have, or click like or comment so that more people see it? And I'll do the same for your stuff. So it's like, I'll have your back, you have mine. And we have a fun graphic of an Asian woman holding a bullhorn, and she's yelling, but she's smiling too, getting her message out there. So the other point I wanted to make is I wanted to just kind of dive into what we have in the toolkit itself. And this is where the bulk of the toolkit is really looking at the timeline for the toolkit. I'm just going to kind of go over the steps regarding the marketing and communication pieces, or the promotion timeline. Next slide, please. So it is about who you know. Like I said, consider your network. And this is where you can ask someone directly for a boost. Like I said, if you know you have something that's going out on social media, you can call your friends and partners and say, hey, be sure to like it when you see it online. And we as a disability community, a lot of the times our social media networks tend to be just our disability related causes and groups. And hopefully Accessible Earth Month will provide an opportunity to reach out beyond that and look at people who are on the forefront of climate change conversations, more sustainability conversations regarding, different things that you care about in different ways. So those are other things to keep in mind. And the photo I'm sharing is one of my favorite photos because it is Alice Wong, someone who I consider a guru in social media. When I share something and I really want a lot of followers to see it, I make sure she knows about it and that she's also resharing. So that's a word for the wise. Be sure to follow Alice Wong. She has an awesome blog. And it's called, I think it's the Disability Visibility Project. I'll make sure you guys get a link to her stuff. But she always, when she promotes something, she gets thousands of people behind her. So someone to follow. And the photo is actually of President Barack Obama in the White House with a robot. Alice Wong is actually the first person to ever meet a US president via robot. So a cool AT photo as well. Next slide, please. So I want to just dive into the promotion timeline that we mentioned in the toolkit itself. So we talk about 10 weeks prior to an event, all the way leading up to the day before. And it's much more detailed than this. And of course, you've got to tailor it to what you need. If you are tabling a booth at an existing Earth Day event, a lot of times, a lot of the logistics are are handled for you. So if you, for example, were part of the Whole Earth Festival in Davis here in Northern California, they do a lot of promotions, they get a lot of media already. So a lot of time you won't have to do big pushes to get people to your event, but you may have to do some local pushes to get people to come to your booth. So we look at things, I look at things sometimes 10 weeks prior, even beyond that, but let's just start here. So the first thing, a lot of communities have online calendars, and this is like community calendars of free events and local public events. I urge you all to find a way to make sure your event is there. I say this also because the ones who manage these online calendars, a lot of times they're also the major TV news networks who are hosting them. So it's a twofer. Once you have your event on the community calendar, it's getting broadcast online with a big audience, and it also puts your event on the radar for media. So potentially a TV station can come and cover the event if it's something, you know, that's different. And this is something that's different, because I don't think that the environmental community has looked at accessibility in sustainable solutions before. So the other point is developing media and outreach materials. If you are part of an independent living center that's a member of CFILC, there's good news. You can reach out to me because I'm technically your PR person also, and I can help you get started. And the other good news is the toolkit actually has some links to how to create media materials and some other helpful guides. So we also put a templated media advisory there just as a suggestion. It makes things easy. You could just kind of plug in the information for your own event. And then 6 to 8 weeks prior, and really leading all the way up until the very day of the event, is promotions. This is where you distribute media materials and your flyers, and this is where you invite your community. And we left that broad because for some people, it's email is the best way to reach them. I know for millennials and younger, people are using emails less. So if you want youth engagement, you may want to consider more social media pushes. Next slide, please. And then 4 weeks out is more of I mean, you're preparing throughout, but in my mind, this is where the promotions preparation really happens. This is when you're distributing the media materials that go to the broadcast outlets. You're starting to post more regularly on social media. And Maria asked earlier if the artwork that we have is going to be available, and it is. So our brilliant graphic designer here in the office, Jose, has designed some different templates for you all to use for your Earth Day events. So some of it is just kind of the Earth-shaped backdrop with people with disabilities in icons walking. And then there's one that's a little bit more built out, where all you have to do is put in the text that you want to use in the materials. And we're here as a resource to you as well. So you can easily create some social media that has some style to it. And then the next part is the 2 weeks. Oh, sorry. The 2 weeks prior, this is when you want to connect with media, make phone calls, and I can also assist with this if you're a CFILC member. And then feature on social media. I put that specifically if you are having a fix-a-thon, or if you are having a donation drop-off, it's a great opportunity to mention what's going to be happening at your booth or at your event. Give like little teasers. Next slide, please. And then on the day of the event, I challenge you to go live. I think it generates a lot more buzz for your community and also captures the moment in real time. And then it lives online so that you can watch it again later. That's true for Facebook at least. But I do say, if you are going to go live, we always say make sure it's accessible. There's new apps now on different platforms that you can download, or if you have an iPhone or an iPad, there are built-in devices that allow you to caption as you go. They aren't the best, but at least it's a start. You can go in and adjust the captions later. And then also, if you have an ASL interpreter, that also makes the video accessible. Sometimes if you already have an ASL interpreter available, you can just make sure that they're in view of the video that you're creating on Facebook Live. And then you've got one more accessibility feature down. And then the last part, people forget to acknowledge everyone that helped to make the event possible. We want to thank partners, sponsors, your staff members, anyone who was instrumental in making it happen. And we may do that physically, or we may do it in the moment, but don't forget to do this online as well. This also helps you build their audience and helps build our audience. And this is where you can also ask for feedback to prepare for next year's event. Next slide, please. All right, I think that's it for us. I know we kind of blew through a lot of this. I will also make sure we have the link to the toolkit itself in our chat. I'm putting that in there right now so you can take a look at it. But we wanted to know if you have any questions for us regarding this toolkit or anything else. Feel free to ask the question in the chat.
This is Kevin. I would just like to say that there's been a tremendous amount of effort put into this toolkit, and it has dozens and dozens of suggestions, activities, links to other useful information. And Kyla has done the lion's share and has done an incredible job, and everybody really should go check it out, and I guarantee you it'll make your life easier. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
Thank you, Kevin. This is Kyla. I just want to say that we have some questions. I can read them if that's okay. So Maria Magana asked, what kind of conversation should each ILC begin to have and build an internal conversation with consumers? That is a really great question. I think it's a great opportunity if your office has a staff meeting to let them know that, this concept of Accessible Earth Month is coming up in April. Would our office like to participate? And I think that's a good question starter. From there, it's letting them know that, people on both sides, there was a walkout on, I think it was last Thursday, there was a walkout for climate change organized by youth all over the world. And Sacramento had its own walkout where youth led discussions at the Capitol steps. And I went with the YO Disabled and Proud, or the Youth Organizing Disabled and Proud group. And there were young people there in high school speaking and talking about how they want to get together for climate change. And when I spoke to them one-on-one, I told them that we represent the disability community, and they said they wanted to make sure that we were included in the conversation. So it's not an adversarial situation. This is really an opportunity to bridge build, because once I started talking about that we're working on this collaboratively, we got such great responses from people who said, oh, should we have an ASL interpreter next time? Absolutely. Should we have, should we consider the building space? Yes. So these are the great ways to start bridging these conversations. I have another question that says, I know most of the presentation was to build a community event. I was wondering and interested in building momentum with the agency. Absolutely. These are all just suggestions. And you'll find that the toolkit itself also has more suggestions, but this is really just a starting point. We would love for this to become an opportunity for us all to start shifting our conversations and calling each other and saying, what's working in your region? And then, maybe that could be something that we can work on moving forward. We have another question.
So, Sally has asked, Allie, she asked, how many email notifications or social media posts do you suggest without over inundating your contact list? And then she's referring to how many posts regarding one event.
Got it. I think Allie might have.
I'm still here, but
good.
Thanks, Allie. That's a great question. Good to see you on the call. I actually think it's a little bit more of it's kind of a Kyla and Allie question, I would say. Why don't you go ahead first, Kyla, and then I will share if I've missed anything.
No. Yeah, it really depends, Sally. It's hard to say since You know, different generations also communicate differently, and I think a lot of us, our inboxes are very inundated already, and so sometimes, you know, with brands or companies that I follow, I love getting constant communication from them. So it's hard to say. Allie, did you want to weigh in?
I was just gonna say, you know, yeah, I think it depends who's on your outreach list, and who are your kind of key organizations. Also giving folks a call week out and leaving a message, I think, is also a key component of sustaining and building that relationship. So in terms of social media, I would say that, you know, you don't want to post every hour, but like you want to probably post once a day, and then as it gets closer, you want to then like maybe do a countdown. So maybe it's like the, you know, the day of, and then, you know, 4 hours before, the hour before, and then it's starting, if that makes sense. Kyla, would you concur with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. It's a little easier on social media, I feel like, because you know, people can opt out, or if you can create a Facebook event, I strongly recommend that, because it puts your event, if you list it as public, in different circles geographically, meaning closer in location to where your event is located, since your networks may be limited. You know, like I said before, a lot of times we only friend or add organizations that are related to the disability community, where if you create a public Facebook event, it makes it public to the local area. So anyone who's looking for an event in the area, it'll turn up for them. Kevin just posted the toolkit link. Since we had a question, when will the toolkit be available? The good news is it is available already. So, and it's already there.
So we have a question from Maria. She asks, what kind of conversations should each ILC begin to have and build, and an internal conversation with consumers?
I think we started that one, but the internal conversation with consumers we didn't cover. Allie, do you have any ideas about that?
You know, I think it's it really depends on each center, but I think one-on-one conversations with first staff, like if you're, you know, wheeling or moving around the office and people have a moment, I think it's those one-on-one connections. Be like, hey, you know, Earth Day's coming up, like curious if you've ever done anything for it, and you know, I have, you know, there's this resource, like, would you be interested in like talking about how we could maybe do something here? So that would be, and then, you know, asking your colleagues themselves, like, how do you think we can reach our consumers best, and sharing that thought process with your colleagues, both on a one-on-one level, as well as like if you are, as Kyla shared before, in a staff meeting setting. In terms of consumers, I would, you know, the first question I would say is, where are your consumers already congregating? So like if there is a regular meeting or peer support group, going into those spaces, and like, of course, checking in with the facilitator and seeing if maybe a topic of conversation can be accessible, you know, Earth Day and what that means, and exploring like what that means to the consumers, because this is a new concept.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that there's also those one-on-one conversations with your consumers as well, to start building, like shifting and just opening up the space to be like, oh, Earth Day and environmental conservation, like we all connect to that. We're all impacted by it, and there's ways that we can integrate that into our work here that would not only benefit, you know, the partnerships, but also benefit you as a consumer, right? Specifically, you know, talking to consumers who use AT, and how that connects to the environment. So those are some conversation starters that I hope may be a little bit helpful, but I'm happy to dive deeper with anyone offline.
Thank you, Allie.
This is Kevin. One of the things you can have conversations with your people in your neighborhood and your community, but the other thing too that needs to be discussed is your capacity for reuse. Originally here at CFILC, Tressa Favuzzi and I were planning on doing durable medical equipment and doing it off-site, having a warehouse, a place to clean it and store it. And by the time we looked at it, it would cost us about $15,000 to $20,000 a year at the minimum to do that. And that's just for the renting the space, the equipment, and having volunteers man it. So you need to discuss the scope of work that you want to do. Do you want to do something like hearing aids? You want to take older iPads that are still in good shape and working and be able to give those out to the community? So you got to figure out what you want to focus on as well, and how you can handle it internally in your capacity.
That's a good point. Thanks, Kevin. Well, I just want to check to see if we have any other questions. Well, seeing no questions, thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, and with that, thank you all.
Thank you.